Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dylan. This is my cousin Carl, and this is All You Can Board, and this is another edition of Own It, Play It, Skip It, where we each take a look at 3 different games and we rank them as should you own this game, should you just play this game, or should you skip it entirely. Now, obviously, these are just our opinions. You might have a completely different opinion from what we say, but this is just from our experience, some things you might want to consider and why you might want to play them, actually add them to your collection, or just not even check them out at all. So we each picked 3 games. This is the first time that we're each going to look at an older title as well. And by older, I don't mean like, this isn't going to be like Scrabble or anything like that. But although maybe one day. But so I think...
I don't think Scrabble will make it into this type of video.
So I think the one I'm taking a look at is from 2016. So by older game, about 5-6 years ago. Do you know when yours came out?
I think
roughly?
2013 or 2011,
so
something like that. So maybe
yeah. So the last game we each look at will be a little bit of an older title, but the other ones I think are all fairly newer. So I'm going to throw it to Carl, and you can kick things off.
All right. So the first one I'm going to talk about today is called The Whatnot Cabinet. So this is a 2021 game. It's designed by Steve Finn, who you might recognize as the designer of Biblios. Beautiful artwork from Beth Sobel. This is published by Pencil First Games. It's a game for 1 to 4 players, plays in about 20 minutes. It's basically a combination of sort of tile laying and set collection. So Dylan's going to have some B-roll up on screen, but also turn the back of the box here. Each player gets this little cabinet that's like a 4x3 cabinet where you're going to be basically collecting tiles that have different objects on them and storing them in your cabinet. And you're trying to store, there's I think 5 different colors and 5 different types of objects. Like there's like animals and vases and leaves and things like that. And basically you're trying to collect these items from a menu in front that all players are kind of taking turns taking these items from, and you're trying to put them in your cabinet in certain formations to score points. So you want to get, let's say, objects of all the same color going down in your columns. If you get let's say all 4 tiles of the same color going down, you'll get 4 points for that column. If you get 1 each of 4 different colors, you'll get 2 points instead. And then similarly for the rows going lengthwise, instead of colors, you're going for the types of objects. So if you get 3 of the same type, you get 3 points, or if you get 1 of each of 3 different types, and you get 1 point. So it's the set collection where you're collecting in 2 different ways with the colors and the object types and stuff. But what makes this game really interesting is the way you actually take your actions and pick tiles. So it's got something that kind of reminds me of King Domino, because you have this little action selection thing that has 5 different actions. And depending which action you take, that determines how you're going to choose tiles that round. So if you go to spot number 1, for example, you're just drawing blind tiles from the bag. You pick 3 random tiles, and 2 of them you have to keep and put into your little cabinet. But that also determines turn order. So at the beginning of every round, whoever's in that first slot who took the first action in the previous round, they're going to get first choice as to which action they want this round. So that's why I say it's kind of like King Domino, where, in King Domino, a lot of the time the best tile that you're picking is at the later, at the end. Yep. And so you'll go last and pick it. And once you go last, you might get stuck picking last because now everyone else is going to pick first, but you know that you got something better. Whereas going earlier is a bit more of a risk because you have less control over what you're getting. It plays really quickly. With 2 players, you only play 3 rounds because each player gets 2 turns per round. And with 3 or 4 players, it plays over, I think, 6 rounds. But super quick game. I've only played it so far as a 2-player game, but I've played this with my wife probably 4 or 5 times. We've enjoyed it a lot. She's been asking to play it quite a bit. She really likes these kind of quick, tile laying games. This one is going to be a play it from me. It's a game that I think it doesn't do there isn't anything specific that's if you were to explain this, no one's going to be whoa, that sounds really novel or really cool. There isn't this, there isn't a specific hook to bring you into the game. But what makes me really like this game a lot is the combination of the quick play time, the fact that it plays in 20 minutes, the fact that I could see it playing even better with higher player counts, even though it plays really well with just 2 players. The artwork and components are really nice. It's just a really simple package, but even after playing it 5 times in the span of a week, I didn't think I was going to be I didn't feel tired of it. Some games maybe feel a little simple after a certain number of plays. This had a good level of replayability with the way you take those different actions and just that puzzle. There's also little scoring objectives you can get and little things that kind of change it up from play to play. So I think it's a really well done game. It's just not something that I think is a must own for everyone, especially because of the fact that the production is very nice and it's it's really nice artwork and stuff. It's not it's a $15-$20 game. I think if it was half the price, maybe I'd be saying own it, but it is, I think, Canadian. I paid $35 for it, so it's It's not super cheap, probably the same price as a game like Cascadia or something.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it's really good, and everyone should check it out at least once, but not necessarily a must own.
Have you played it solo or read about what the solo mode is
No,
like?
I have not yet.
Okay. I just noticed they had a solo mode, which is always
Yeah.
interesting to me, and sometimes in tile laying games, I'm kind of curious like how it's implemented and if it seems like it's tacked on or if it's actually a really good solo experience.
Right.
But
You know what? And I haven't even actually read the rules for the solo. I should have made more of an effort to check it out solo. It didn't strike me as the type of game that I was going to gravitate to playing solo.
I feel like games that aren't built from the ground up to really accommodate solo, when they sort of just have a solo mode, the only way I'm ever going to play them usually is if it's a game that I love playing so much that I just will look for any excuse to play. Like playing a Feast Road in solo. Here's my mention of Feast Road for the drinking game.
I had to get it in there.
But really any Uwe Rosenberg game even. Is like those games I enjoy playing so much that I will set it up to play the solo mode because I'm just like, I haven't played this in a while, I want to play it. Where I wonder with a game like Whatnot Cabinet, are you going to be like, I love this game so much that I come back to play the solo mode specifically, you know what I mean? But,
right. Yeah. And for the play time, like the fact that it is only 20 minutes, like maybe I will try it out someday, but even if I was going to play a solo game, I might be more inclined to play like a roll and write to try and like beat my high score or something like that. Yeah. But totally enjoyable game, really nice table presence, like for I don't know. I think it's definitely worth checking out, and one that I think a lot of people would overlook because of maybe the name and what's on the box. It looks like a pretty simple game, but there's more to it than you think. And Steve Finn always does some really interesting stuff with his design. So yeah,
I did not know that Steve Finn designed this game.
Oh, okay.
I saw it on your shelf all the time. I've heard of it talked about for whatever reason. I did not know that until you just said it right now, which makes me even more interested to check it out now.
Yeah, well, he does have his own publishing company that he publishes a lot of his games under, but this one's from Pencil First Games. That is the Whatnot Cabinet.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
Oh, no.
Me. Okay. There's our first real blooper run. Desmond, get out of there. Okay, we're back. So that was, we and Carl were just joking off camera. That was, out of 200 videos, it's probably our first legitimate blooper. So yeah, it's all cleaned up. No games were harmed in the making of this video. It's all fine. The first game I'm going to take a look at is the newer one I just got, and that is Kabuto Sumo. This is from Board Game Tables. It is a 2 to 4 player game. It's a pretty quick playing game. It says 15 to 20 minutes, and for a lot of times with time allotments on boxes, I think that they can be pretty, on the low end. We find it'll be like, oh, let's say 60 minutes, and we're like, generally it's probably going to be higher.
Usually what they list on the box is best case scenario, if everyone has played the game before and everyone knows what they're doing, then you could get it in this time, right?
Yeah. Kabuto Sumo, I will say, is I would not be surprised if you can sometimes get games done in less than 15 minutes. If you're talking about the second you start your first turn. It is a very quick playing game. It is a dexterity game. You basically have a little ring that's elevated. It's actually elevated off the table, great table presence, and there's going to be 2-player tokens that are sort of bug-shaped on this with a bunch of tokens surrounding them and stacked and everything, and every turn you're going to be sliding a new token on, and other tokens are going to spill off the sides. Every token that spills off the side you're adding into your own personal supply to use in the future to be able to push back on, and the entire aim of the game is essentially to push your opponent's bug token off the board, and if you do, you win. You have these different bug characters that have their own powers that you're going to be using. Each one comes with its own special token. It might be one that's super long. It might be one that's has sort of a wrapped around one that goes on top of other tokens. There's all different kinds that are in there. They help you to be able to actually add them to your supply. You need to fulfill different conditions to actually be able to get them. You can't just use them right from the get-go. So it is a really good game in terms of table presence and in terms of being one that I think is going to hit with younger audiences, especially because these type of games, I think when you see them being played, it's something you're going to gravitate towards and want to engage in. Yeah. I will say that I'm not the biggest dexterity game fan. I like them, but I think that usually dexterity games have to do something unique to bring me to the table. And Kabuto Sumo does, in the same way that when we played Seal Team Flicks, we were really intrigued to play a game like that. The problem I had with Kabuto Sumo, and I definitely want to play it more because the person I played it with is not a fan of dexterity games. So to be fair, the entire session probably had this air of hesitancy and pessimism around it a little bit. But I found that there was turns where all of a sudden it's it would be pushed on, nothing would spill off, and we sort of just kind of look at each other, and it's like, okay, yeah, my turn now. And it was just like this weird moment of like nothing really happened that turn. Sometimes you have this great turn, stuff spills off, and you're like, oh, I got to recover from that. My guy's getting close to the edge. How do I, now slide something on to protect myself? Those ones were more interesting turns. But there was just a few turns every single time we played that just felt like, I guess it's my turn now. Should I applaud you? Should I make you feel good for that? Like it just felt really anticlimactic, which is not kind of what I was expecting going into it. And again, that being said, I think that depending who you're playing with and depending how the game flows, and if it's getting really aggressive, where all of a sudden someone's getting close to the edge and they find a way to push that token back, it could become this really epic struggle where you're like, oh my god, I'm on the edge of the board, and then it's a little bit more memorable. But for me, the games that I played so far just kind of felt a little bit flat. There were some really fun moments and some things I really liked about it, and I definitely want to explore all the other powers that are in it, but I was a little bit let down compared to what I was expecting going in. So for me, it would probably be a skip, with the caveat that if you are specifically looking for a game for younger audiences, for kids, for someone who just isn't even that much of a board game player more than they are just sort of a game enthusiast, or someone who just wants something to sort of like do on a table that is would gravitate towards playing games as a kid, like Rebound and Kerplunk and things like that are more interactive, Jenga, things like that. This might be a really cool game to add to that collection where people are going to go, oh my god, like bring out that game where we're pushing the discs on the ring. But for me, and if you're someone who gravitates more to strategy games or wants something a little bit deeper in your dexterity games, this would probably be a skip for me. At least that would be my recommendation.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Can I ask you, how would you compare this to Men at Work, which is one of the kind of maybe newer, like I know Men at Work is usually a longer game, but does Men at Work have more of those exciting moments throughout?
Big time.
Yeah, okay.
Men at Work gets way more hilarious, and there's way more moments of like, I have to pull something off here, and everything's really tense, and every turn feels tense, even though it's not like a game that, Men at Work wasn't in either of our top 50s of all time. No. It's not a game I like love or anything, but the experience, if we were to go back and play right now, from turn one on, even like right from the beginning, there'd be smiles around the table. People would be really engaged with like
and like the tension from everyone, even just watching what the person's doing. You didn't quite get
way more tension in Men at Work. It's the best way to describe it. And Kabuto Sumo, it's not that I was going in expecting tons of tension, but I think it needs a little bit more tension to hit with me, and there was not enough tension, at least in the games that I played. And believe me, even though I'm saying that it's a skip, it's one that I'm going to continue to play, because some of these picks, even that we say for games today or games we've said in the past, those can change and alter and evolve as you play with different player counts or as you play with different people. But for now, I think I have a pretty good sense that for me personally, it's going to end up being a skip, unless I find that the next plays I have just completely, turn the game on its head from what I experienced last time. And even though it does have ways to play at 3 and 4, honestly, 3 might be a great way to experience it, because it's going to be extra crowded on the board, which the more crowded it is, the more things are spilling off the edge, and that'll make it a little bit more competitive. That might be something I'm going to check out next to see is 3-player the right player count. It just, when I came in, I was expecting this to be a game I was only going to want to play at 2, and that's what caught me off guard, is that 2 kind of fell a little bit flat.
Okay, I was going to say, I think I had heard some other, maybe it was on a podcast or something, I think I had heard people say that they enjoyed it most with 3 or 4 because 2 wasn't interactive enough, too far away from your opponent on the board, and maybe what you said, too many turns where nothing happens. I don't know.
So that might be the thing, and maybe that'll be the extra asterisk on this, is like, as a 2-player game, I would say skip, and as 3 or 4, maybe at that point add it as a play to check out and see if it lands for you differently. And that's definitely something I'm going to be doing. So if you're curious about what I feel on the game as I play with 3 or 4, check out I'll mention in a video in the future, whether it's a monthly roundup or maybe on our Discord channel or something, and I'll comment on how it played differently at 3 and 4.
Cool.
Yeah, so that is Kabuto Sumo.
All right. Okay, next one I'm going to be talking about here is, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Coatl. And this is co-designed by Pascal Brassard and Etienne Dubois. This is published by Synapses Games. I believe this is their first published game, and I think they're a Canadian publisher, which is part of the reason I bought this and decided to support them and check it out. So this is a game for, I think it's 1 to 4 players. There is a solo mode. Yeah, I have not tried the solo mode. Plays in about half an hour to an hour, and the basic idea is, well, first off, a coatl is a feathered snake, and you're basically it's a game that has some set collection and like meeting goals, some pattern building type stuff where basically there's a central board where there's these different types of these plastic tokens that can either be head, tail, or body pieces of these snakes. And you're basically on your turn, you're either going to be taking pieces from the central area to put on your own little playmat. The second option is you can play these prophecy cards that basically are denoting how many points you're going to get for certain Coatl. Or you can assemble your Coatl. So you basically have these 3 feathered snakes that you're going to be assembling throughout the game. Each one has to have 1 head piece, 1 tail piece, and a variable amount of body pieces depending what goals you're trying to get. And you can have up to 4 prophecy cards assigned to a snake. So let's say one of them you're getting a bunch of maybe red and blue pieces because you have cards that say every time you alternate red, blue, you get this number of points. Then you might get another card that says for every blue piece you have, you get this many points. Or if your Coatl has, the head and the tail are this color, then you get this many points. Or you can't have this in order to score these points. So there's all these different scoring conditions on the cards, and it sort of has this, maybe not a race element, but it has this aspect of the first person to complete their 3rd Coatl triggers the end of the game. So similar to, like, it's not at all a similar game to Clank, but it has that kind of thing where you have to be watching your opponents, like in Clank where you see as soon as someone starts going for the exit, you think, shoot, I gotta speed things up and not get trapped in underground or whatever. In here it's a similar thing where if you see someone has already completed 2 of their Coatls and they're getting close to the 3rd, you don't want to keep all these things open-ended and be trying to chase all these important scoring cards if the end of the game is coming up. So it falls in that family weight range of game, kind of like something like Azul maybe in terms of complexity. The components are really, really nice. It's got this kind of theme that I haven't seen in too many other games, and the tactile aspect of actually clicking these pieces together and linking them and making these, chaining together these long snakes, and the variety of like some snakes you might want to get 4 cards and try to score 20 some points. Other ones you might try and complete and keep them smaller and race and try to trigger the end of the game quicker. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. This one is going to be a play it from me. There's a couple reasons. One is there's these temple cards that you get that are basically common goals that everyone can kind of go for, and when I played it a few times, I had a bit of an issue with it because the temple cards are very specific, but they feel like it's not super easy to meet the conditions, and they don't feel like they give you enough points. Every time I've played, I feel like I spend too much time trying to go for the temple cards, and at the end, such a small percentage of my points came from the temple cards, but it feels like just the way they're implemented in the game, it feels like they should be more important or have more of an outcome on the end of the game. And there were times where I won without getting many temple point cards, or if I really went hard on them, then I lost because I wasn't prioritizing other things.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if long term, if it's something that I need in my collection. Like maybe one day when I have a almost 5-month-old baby right now, like maybe if in a few years I had a couple kids who are like 4, 5, 6 years old kind of thing, maybe I could get this to the table a lot more as a family game.
Yeah.
Right now I don't think it's something I'm going to play super often. I do like it quite a bit. I think it's a really good design, especially as this kind of like family weight game that plays within an hour. I think it's definitely worth checking out for anyone who might even be curious about it. But yeah, it's hard for me to call it a must-own game right now after my plays. But yeah, we played it once together, I believe, right?
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it. I was just going to say it's interesting what you say about the temple cards, because similarly, I remember like when we were playing Sagrada, one of the comments I had in Sagrada was sort of the opposite, where they had I think it was the private objectives, where you could score so many points off your private objectives that it almost, made the other objectives and the other ways to score irrelevant. Not irrelevant, like it would still matter, but really as long as you did very good on your private objectives and prioritize them, you could score very high points. And so that's sort of the opposite of what you're saying here with the temple cards, and I think it's kind of hard to strike that balance when you're gonna offer points with something. If you go too low, people are gonna go wonder, well, like, why am I even gonna go for this? And then it's gonna feel like this weird tacked on element to the game. But if it's the other end and it's too many points, suddenly it's going to sort of make the other parts of the game feel irrelevant a little bit, right? So that's a hard thing to balance, and it might just be that Coatl is one that struggles in one direction, Sagrada is one that struggles in another direction, which is interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is cool about Coatl is that the idea of having to be like, here's the prophecy card, and this is what you want to accomplish with your Coatl. Those type of cards, that type of mechanic in games is not new. It's not unique. There's
Right.
there's tons of games that feature like, here's what you're trying to achieve, whether it's, arranging tiles, whether it's collecting sets of cards, whatever. But it's like Coatl's taken something that is common and then said, but the way we're going to make unique is just in the fact that it's going to have these physical pieces that click together and everything.
Yes.
So it just puts another coat of paint that sort of takes something and almost makes you forget that it is something that you've seen across many games.
Yeah.
Even like Gingerbread House, which I just bought, I haven't played yet. It has it where like you get a fairy tale creature, and it's like this creature or this character wants to have these specific treats or whatever, and so that's your goal on the card. This one is saying you want to have these specific colors linked up in this way.
Yes.
But the clicking of the pieces makes it feel, very novel and everything.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and there's things I do like a lot that come in from other games too, like the conflicting priorities. Like, I have this card that can score this way, but if I play that one, then this one's going to be kind of irrelevant. And there are a lot of interesting choices to make, even in terms of how you want to economize the 8 spots you have on your board, and when do you take that one turn to assemble your Coatls. Like, there's more going on than it looks. So if you're the type of person who looked at this and thought, oh, it just looks like one of those super simple, boring family games, like, give it a shot at least, because I could see some people trying this and thinking, whoa, this is really going to be a hit with my family or whatnot. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. That is Coatl.
Nice. All right, the next game I'm going to look at is called Riftforce. This is from One More Time Games. Riftforce is a...
You mentioned this was sent to us by Capstone.
Yes, it was sent to us by Capstone to do some content on. We've been checking it out for the last couple months. I played it recently in January, and once again, I played it before with Carlo. This is a 2-player card battling game in a way, but it uses a sort of lane system where everything that's in my lane is basically, is going to go to battle with the opposite lanes, and sometimes also the adjacent lanes, depending on the characters that you're using. So the lane system is not something that is super unique, but it's also something that's not overdone in games. That not a lot of games have done it, and the way that Riftforce implements it is pretty unique in the fact that it's not always just this lane, does battle with this lane. Sometimes it'll be that this character does something to this lane, then that character moves to another lane and then impacts that lane as well. The interesting thing about Riftforce is that every single game you play, you're going to have a different selection of cards that are essentially in your personal deck. So I can't remember if they're called wizards or characters or whatever it is, but elements. Guilds. So there's, I think, it's something like 10 guilds in the box, and every game, each player's going to get 4, and there's going to be 2 that are left out. And so you're going to be doing a bit of a drafting system to see which of your 4 guilds that you're going to be using. Each one has its own ability associated with it, and that's going to build your deck differently. So even if you've played with, say, this certain guild before, you may not have played with it in conjunction with these ones, and that's going to alter your strategy, and you're going to be able to sort of come up with a new strategy for yourself, but also to go to battle against whatever your opponent has chosen, right? So even the first time me and Carlo played, the ones that were left out, I then used the next time I played, and it felt vastly different because I had to factor in these new abilities I hadn't used before. Yeah. So that's going to make it so that it's very unique in the deck you're using, but also my favorite part about Riftforce is the fact that you have 2 things you're doing on your turn. I should say 3, but the main actions you're going to be doing the most are these 2 actions where you're either going to be playing cards to your lanes, or you're going to be utilizing cards you've already played to your lanes. And when you're actually playing cards to your lane, you can play them all in the same lane, or you can play them in adjacent lanes, but everything always comes down to either playing or using cards of the same number or the same suit, essentially, the same element. And even if you have this amazing boards set up for yourself and you're like, oh my god, look how strong my board is, my opponent barely has anything out there, if you don't have the right elements or the right numbers in your hand, you may not be able to utilize your board, and then you're having to do the third action, which is essentially drawing back up to 7, and that might not even get you the cards you need, and suddenly you're like, I have this board that looks imposing, but I can't utilize it. But your opponent might not even know that, and so they might think, I have to adjust my board or start doing something because I see what they're going to do, and I can bluff and make it seem like I'm going to, which is something that happened in the last game I played with my friend Braden, who you might have known from our Discord, is that I didn't know what was in his hand. I'm looking at his board thinking, I might lose the game next turn if he has this, and so do I go for the big play now? Do I play I hope that he doesn't have. There's just that lack of information makes Riftforce very compelling, and of course all the abilities and how they work in conjunction with each other makes for some turns where I feel like I look at the board and I say, there's about 4 different things I can do here, and all of them have pros and cons. Which one do I do? And after I do it, after I see how my opponent responds, I might look back and go, oh, I should have done the other one. But it's never a frustrating thing. It's more of I want to play this again, and then I'm learning the guilds better and the abilities better. So there is a lot of staying power for such a little box in terms of the variety of all the guilds, how they work together, which ones your opponents chooses, which one you choose. The fact that it's a race to 12 Riftforce to win the game means that some guilds have a way to say get multiple Riftforce in a turn, and all of a sudden, I remember I described this in if you watch the video where I talked about the games I played in January, I described this a little bit, but do you remember the game we played? And I think there was a moment where I took like the lead by 3 or 4 Riftforce because I had a really strong turn. And so all of a sudden you look at it and you think, oh, I have a really strong lead here. But I basically exhausted myself by doing that. Like my board was now diminishing. I had a really low hand of cards. I was going to have to use an entire turn drawing back up. And so it gave you an opportunity to basically just go and just like take the win. But that happened, a very similar thing happened with Braden. And so I realized that part of Riftforce is not getting too greedy, but you constantly feel you like want to get greedy because you look at your hand and look what's out there and say, I can have an amazing turn, but you can't deplete your resources too much, right? So
it has those swings back and forth where the momentum swings, right?
Big swings. I really, really, really love Riftforce. Honestly, like the biggest, and so I should say the only criticism I can come up with, and I mentioned it with you, is personally I would have found a different way to differentiate the lanes than just laying down the cards. I find that
the way the game actually is set up and
it can look a little bit clumsy, and sometimes the cards are moving. I almost wish that this was like there was a deluxe version that had sort of a cardboard like lane divider or a play mat or something like that to do instead. But that's a minor complaint because the actual gameplay itself is solid. So this is, if you can't guess, this is a definite own for me. This is one I'm going to definitely come back to and play more often. And because it plays very quick, like you can have games of 30 minutes. I could see this being one where you finish and you say, let's play another round, maybe let's play best of 3.
Or and one that's going to reward you for playing with the same person, or at least someone who knows the game, because once you get to know all the different guilds and you see them more often, like it definitely creates a new level of thinkiness every time you come back to it, I think. Yeah,
you have to make sure all your lanes are like represented. If you leave too many lanes open, the other person can start gaining Riftforce because you have these open lanes. That's the way the order of your cards in each lane matters, because damage is usually dealt just to the one at the end of the lane or the start of the lane, so the ones in the center will tend to feel safer. There's a lot going on for
I have to say there's game. I don't know if we even like discussed this a whole lot when we were playing, but it is like there's a lot of hand management too, because the cards you keep determine what you're going to play to activate the stuff that's out there. Not quite in Arboretum style, but it is almost like you're playing stuff, but you have to hold on to enough stuff in your hand that allows you to actually make use of what you've played. Similar to Arboretum. I don't know, a lot of cool stuff in here.
So that is a Riftforce. You might have heard this. It's been pretty popular in terms of how, being talked about in the community, but if you haven't, definitely check it out, especially if you're a fan of card battlers and want something with a bit of a different twist. Riftforce does a great job.
Yeah, awesome game. All right, and the last one I'm looking at today is Glass Road. So this is designed by Uwe Rosenberg, published by Z-Man Games. Part of the reason I decided to cover this one as well is because I think it just got re-released, reprinted by Capstone this year. This is one of the, I don't want to say, it's maybe not lesser known Uwe Rosenberg games, but maybe lesser appreciated. I think when a lot of people
talked about.
Yeah, I think when people talk about their favorite Uwe Rosenberg games, you hear a lot of the same ones, right? Agricola, Feast for Odin, Caverna, Le Havre. People don't often talk about Glass Road, and I think it's a game that deserves a lot more attention. It's a 1 to 4 player game, plays in, I think on the box it says 20 minutes per player. That sounds about right. Yep. The solo game plays really quickly, and honestly, this is one of the few games that when it has a wide player count that I can truly say it is like awesome at all player counts. Like really good solo game, probably best with 2 or 3 players, still really good with 4. It's always a fairly quick game. And it does quite a bit of like unique and novel stuff. So basically the idea is the game plays over 4 rounds. Every player has the same 15 of these specialist cards. And these specialists, there's like the water carrier and the the clay worker and all these kinds of things. And each card will have 2 abilities on it. There'll be a top and a bottom ability. And basically every round from your 15 specialist cards, you're going to pick 5 of them, and you're going to end up playing 3. We're going to go around clockwise, and everyone's going to take turn. You're going to play a card. And let's say I play the clay worker. I'm going to say, is anyone else holding the clay worker? And if anyone else is holding the clay worker, they'll say yes, and they'll also get to play that clay worker if I've played mine. if anyone else has played the same card, then everyone who played it is only going to get one of those actions, either the top or the bottom action. Let's say I played the clay worker and nobody else played a clay worker, then I'm actually going to get both actions. So, and the game plays over 4 rounds, and every round you're going to play anywhere from 3 to 5 of your cards, depending if you picked ones that other players picked, so that you can trigger them on other players' turns. So it's an interesting game of trying to anticipate what other people are going to pick, and you want to have a mix of, you want to pick a few of these occupation or specialist cards that you know or you think no one else is going to pick, because you want to have that second or get both abilities, but you also want to pick a couple that you think you're going to be able to play to piggyback off of other people. And then you have these 2 sort of production wheels where you create your glass and your brick, and it's by producing other resources. And so when you get one of every resource, this little wheel will sort of turn and produce a glass or produce a brick, and you can only hold a maximum of 3 each of those resources. And then there's a few of the cards that allow you to buy cards from a market, and that's basically, or tiles that are like buildings that you put on your own little player board, and that's basically where you're scoring your points at the end of the game, is these buildings are going to score points in different ways, similar to you've seen in a lot of other Uwe Rosenberg games. And I'll say right now, if anyone has played NOOO, which we talked about, is in both of our top 50s as well, it shares some similarities to NOOO in the way that you have your terrain and you're adding these buildings and stuff. But yeah, I really like this game. It's one that came out, I think we were saying before, I think it was 2013, 2011, something like that. It's one of the oldest games I've had in my collection, and I don't think it's ever a game that's going to like climb into my top 10 of all time or anything like that. It's never going to be my favorite or even maybe second favorite Uwe Rosenberg game, but it's very close. I think it's definitely an underrated one. This is one that I'm going to say is absolutely an own it. The biggest reason is not only the fact that it is a really good game, but the fact that it plays, again, really well at all player counts from 1 to 4, and even at the highest player count. Like, if I was maybe teaching 3 new people playing at 4 players, like maybe worst case scenario like that, it might take maybe an hour and a half, but that's still really good for like a satisfying kind of meatier game. Yeah. I don't know, it's got this kind of like, it's more satisfying than it feels like it should be for the amount of time it takes to play.
It looks like like you look at it and you think, oh, this is another big box Uwe Rosenberg game, but suddenly you realize that with 2 it plays in like 40 minutes, and that's not what you're expecting from a big box Uwe Rosenberg game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like a medium weight one in disguise of a big box game, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, my favorite things about it are the production wheel.
Yeah,
I think at first it can be a little bit, you're trying to like wrap your head around it, but once you realize how it works, you're like, this is amazing and so much fun to play with.
Yeah.
And then it was the first game I ever played where there was some sort of function in, if I play a card, it might mean that someone else gets to piggyback, or I get extra abilities if they don't play cards. It was the first game that I personally played that had that, and so that felt really interesting to me at the time, and since then we've seen it in multiple games. We just saw it in Corrosion as another one that does something similar, but I really like those things in conjunction. But honestly, the biggest attraction is the time that it takes to play, in my opinion, because Uwe Rosenberg games are notorious for sometimes feeling like it daunting. Like I don't know if this one actually has it on it. It doesn't, but a lot of them will say expert level on the bottom, right? And some of these ones of this size, that scares some people off. Or it makes you think, okay, we're gonna sit down, we're about to play like a 2-hour game here, or you're gonna have to learn about farming and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
This just, I remember when we sat down to play, I was blown away when you explained it. I said, there's only 4 rounds, because it just seemed like that's this game's gonna be over so fast. Yeah, exactly. But that's part of the genius, is you have to figure out a way to get everything done in this short amount of time. So
and you have to play the specific cards to buy the, like, you might play a game and only have bought 5 or 6 buildings, or like it's a different puzzle every time to figure out, because there's different buildings available. You know, the timing of, you just got enough resources to get the building, and now someone else bought that building, and now you're like, what am I going to do with these resources? Like, you're having to shift your plans along the way. Really interesting game. Definitely an own it from me. A treasured game that I don't think this will ever leave my collection.
Yeah.
So that is Glass Road by Uwe Rosenberg. Check it out.
Nice. Okay, so the game I'm going to look at, which is an older game, and it's from 2016, so if you consider that old, and that is...
Ancient.
Yeah, ancient.
By our standards.
By board game standards. This is Not Alone. So I'm pretty curious how familiar people are with this game, because I find that whenever I bring this up, I tend to be someone who knows about it and no one else has seemed to have heard about it.
Right.
It is on Board Game Arena too, which
I was gonna say,
there's going to be a really easy way for people to, if you're curious after having heard me talk about it, you can go check it out. This is a 2 to 7 player game, so it accommodates a lot of players. It is better at the higher player counts, so if you can get it to the table with 6 or 7, I think you're going to have a better experience than 2. I would never recommend it with 2 personally. I played it with 3 and it was still enjoyable, but every time the best experience I've had were the 2 times I played with 4 and 5. The reason I think it's great that it's on Board Game Arena is that'll be an easy place to play with 6 or 7 because you don't have to necessarily have gathered 6 or 7 people in the same room. This is an asynchronous game in the sense that one person is going to be the creature and everyone else is going to be basically trying to survive on the planet that the creature's trying to hunt them all down. So you basically have all these different place cards. You're going to start the game with only having access to the main 5. You're going to have ways to acquire 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 to go to these ones that have more interesting abilities. Every place card has their own different abilities that you're playing, and you have a hand of cards. So I will have a hand of cards that has the 5 place cards that I start with. The creature is going to be secretly deciding where he's going to go, and I'm going to be playing place cards to say where I'm going. If I end up on the same place as the creature, there's going to be detriments to that, and I'm not going to be able to use those places' abilities, and the abilities are going to be ways to basically further this marker that is going to lead to our escape, and the rest of us are trying to escape. So the rest of the survivors all win or lose together, and the creature wins or loses by himself, or his or herself. So the interesting thing is that because you have a team of players, you're working with them, but at the same time, you each are trying to further your own individual, not agendas, but like, if I succeed, it's in the best interest of everyone because it's going to further our collective marker.
Right.
So you want to succeed, but at the same time, sometimes if you guys both go to the same location and the creature goes there, you're going to get extra damage done because you both share the same location. So you can't share that information at the table because the creature's at the table with you. So I can't just be like, hey, let's go to location 4 because the creature will go to location 4. So you have to find interesting ways sometimes to look at what your teammates have played with their cards and think, I know she is probably going to go to location 2 because she only has 2 cards in her hand. That's what she's going to want to do. The creature has that information as well, so I'm not going to go to location 2. So we spread ourselves out around the planet. Yeah, and as you acquire locations 6 through 10, it gets harder for the creature to track you down because now there's 10 locations you could be going to instead of just 5. So it gets harder on the creature. The creature has its own set of hunt cards that make things easier for the creature to hunt you down, and he gets access to those as he goes on, and there'll be ones that make it very easy for the creature to hunt you. There's a lot of cool stuff going on here, and because it's this one against everyone else, there's just these really, hilarious moments and unintentionally hilarious moments where, everyone is, if it was me and a bunch of our friends against you, you get these moments where all of us are kind of looking at you and they're like, where are you going to go? And you're like, I don't know, where am I going to go, right? Like, it's a really fun game to play, like, around a table. Yes, BGA is going to make it very easy to access, but I think it's one of those ones where if you can situate the creature on one end of the table and everyone else is on this end, it's going to feel like, how many games have we played where it's 1 against, 5, right?
Yeah,
like
we don't play many 1 versus all games.
And I think that's why this one was such a hit for me because I haven't played that many games, it felt like such a new and unique mechanic. And I'm sure if I played more, maybe this one would end up, slowly moving down the list because I say, oh, this game does it better, this game does it better. But for me, this is one that, like, I just don't get to the table enough, and I have to do a better job of convincing people they need to check it out because I feel like a lot of people just haven't heard of it, and they think like, oh, maybe I'm not interested in the theme of like an alien and having to like escape him or whatever. But there is some really interesting stuff going on here, and the fact that I still had a great time at 3, which these type of games are usually better at higher player counts, I think speaks volumes to the game itself. There actually is, I think, at least one. There's definitely at least one. There might even be multiple expansions for this game. They'll add even more. I think it adds new place cards and new abilities that you can use and stuff like that. So there's ways to expand it as well. This one I think has flown under a lot of people's radar. I'm curious. Let me know in the comments if you've played it, and if you haven't. Even if you haven't played it, let me know because I'm just curious how many people are just unaware of this game. But if you are unaware of it, check it out on BGA minimum, and even if you just get like 3 or 4 people together to play it, because look at this box. No, let it go. the entire this is why I don't store my games vertically. The entire box is like opening up here.
We were just talking about this with some people in our Discord channel about storing games vertically, and they just open up on their own like this.
This entire box is gonna spill. But yeah, so I would highly recommend checking it out. This is definitely, I waffled so much on whether to do an own or a play it, because for me, it's a for sure own. But the problem is that a game that is better at higher player counts, that are like 5, 6, or 7, aren't always the best games to own in your collection, because how often are you going to get that many people together? And when you do, how likely is it that everyone that you're playing with is going to be comfortable playing a game that isn't, entry level, like maybe like something like Code Names or,
right, or yeah, or are you more
right?
likely to play a party game rather
Exactly.
than something like this?
So I'm going to give it a play, but I'm not gonna give it an asterisk, because I feel like every time we do one of these, I'm like, I'm gonna put an asterisk on this one. I'm gonna give it a play, but I will say that as you play it, consider how often you think you'll get this to the table with 4+. If you are very often going to be able to play with higher than 4 because you know a lot of people that are going to enjoy it, then I would say definitely for yourself, probably look into owning it, because this is, I think, one that's going to be very rewarding the more you play it, because everyone's going to want to have their chance being the creature. So even though we might have played it 4 or 5 times, if you're playing with 4 or 5 people, someone still maybe hasn't been the creature, and it's going to be completely new to them, right? So I'm going to give it a play, but it might even end up being higher for you as you explore it a little bit more.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Question for you.
Yeah.
So I know you've mentioned before that you're sometimes some things that might turn you off from a game is like the space or sci-fi theme.
Yeah.
Like, what made you like this? Was it because of the fact that it was the one versus all that you were able to kind of get past the space sci-fi theme? Like,
yeah, I wish I had a good answer for you. We've been discussing this in our Discord too. I don't know why some games land with me with the space theme and some don't. This one is, like, I'm not the biggest proponent, advocate for theme all the time. Sometimes it doesn't, as long as there's good artwork, it almost doesn't matter to me what the theme is. I'm just interested in the gameplay.
Right.
This one specifically, I think, is just because I'd never played a one against everyone else board game when I first played this. It felt so unique to me and so different that I was just so adamant about wanting to get to the table with people to introduce it, that it almost didn't matter to me what the theme was. And I was even telling people, like, even if it seems like you don't want to play a game with aliens, or, because someone who might not enjoy like horror movies and alien movies and stuff might look at it and be like, oh, I don't know if I want to play that game. So I'd be telling people, ignore the theme, ignore the theme, ignore the theme, right? So if I'm telling people that, I'm clearly in some way ignoring the theme. If you're someone who loves the space thing, that might even just be an extra perk and plus. For me, it's almost as if I love this game in spite of not being a huge fan.
So if it was like, a creature in the forest or in a dungeon instead, it wouldn't jump up to an own it. It's not like the space theme isn't holding you back.
It wouldn't jump up to an own it, but it would even be like, if we are giving things ratings, that might give it a couple extra points, because now it's even like, I have an extra incentive to introduce it, right?
But honestly, the fact that you speak so highly of it with a theme that you're not normally crazy about is almost what intrigues me more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's been so many times we've been close to playing this on BGA and stuff. I think one of these times, either physically or BGA, I'm just going to forcibly make people play it, because I'm just curious if it's just me who likes it, or if it's going to be one of those things where everyone's like, why didn't we play this sooner? I'm going to go, yeah, why didn't we play this sooner, everybody?
Well, maybe we'll try with some people in our Discord or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good idea. So yeah, cool. So that is Not Alone. It came out in 2016, and if you haven't checked it out, let me know.
Nice. All right, and those are our 6 games. As Dylan mentioned before, we have done these videos before. If this is your first time watching one of these Own It, Play It, Skip It's, I think this was episode 4, so we've got 3 more of these you can go back and check out. Otherwise, we're curious to hear what you all think. Are these games that, do you own these? Have you tried them? Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Let us know what you think. We also have a Discord channel, so you can, jump over there, and there's, the Discord channel has taken off. We just started, and I think we're already almost up to 200 people. There's tons of people there having awesome conversations. So, if you want somewhere to talk about these games a little more, head on over to the Discord channel. Otherwise, that's it for us. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.